Totally Rad magically appeared on your NES back in 1990. Developed and published by Jaleco, Totally Rad was one of those games that kinda came out toward the end of the NES's lifespan, and sadly went unnoticed by the majority of kids that were moving on to the brand new Super NES. But Jaleco went ahead and brought Totally Rad over from Japan anyway, in the hopes that they might be able to sway a few kids its way with some unique gameplay based around using magic abilities and slathering it with multiple coats of early 90s pop culture absurdity. So was Totally Rad just as, well, totally rad as its name applies? Or is this a case of trying a bit too hard to cater to a particular audience that never cared anyway? Well, grab your favorite magic hat and surfboard, because we're about to see if Totally Rad is as gnarly as it wants you to think it is. Turn the game on and you get one of the most cringe-worthy early 90s video game stories ever imagined happening in front of you. Basically, our hero Jake is trying to learn magic from this guy, only to be interrupted when his girlfriend is kidnapped by some totally bogus mutants. As you're watching this unfold, you may have noticed that the dialogue completely reeks of Bill and Ted's surfer lingo. You all remember Bill and Ted, right?
How's it going, royal ugly dudes?
Put them in the iron meat.
Excellent!
Execute them.
Bogus.
Yeah, those guys. And if you were around back when that movie came out, you already know how every kid in the country was suddenly trying to talk like a stoned out homeless surfer. Totally Rad has taken that concept and completely ran for the finish line with it here, as every single line of dialogue in the game that isn't spoken by, this guy, is totally righteous. Hell, even the instruction manual is written this way. Actually, let me take a second just to show you this manual, as whoever wrote it was either ordered to do this or locked himself in a room with a Word document and then went totally insane. It even has a part where it tells you to completely ignore what's written because it's so boring, and then includes a picture of the guy's girlfriend for some reason. This is some wacky stuff, even for an NES game. After you're done cringing so hard that you can't even move anymore, then go ahead and press the start button to start your totally awesome adventure. If you're totally radical enough to actually start playing the game, you'll find yourself controlling Jake in one of the more colorful action platformers on the NES. Seriously, I had to actually turn my color down just a bit to avoid being blinded by the game's super colorful aesthetic. Once you get your vision back, you'll find that controlling Jake is about as simple as it looks, with him being able to run, jump, and shoot his way through each level. Your main form of attack is a psychic blast of sorts that can be charged up into a much more powerful shot by holding the attack button down. But it can only be used on the ground, since apparently Jake isn't a good enough magician yet to shoot a charge shot while jumping. Your overall goal is to jump and shoot your way through each stage, fighting a variety of mutant baddies on your way to save your super radical girlfriend. And if that's all this game had going for it, well, it'd be fairly average, besides the so bad it's funny dialogue throughout. Thankfully though, Totally Rad has a card up its sleeve in the form of a ton of magic that Jake can use along with this psychic blast. Just press the start button to open up a menu filled with magic attacks, like being able to refill your health, stop time to give yourself a second to slow things down a bit, and even use a variety of elemental magic attacks that clear the screen of any enemies dumb enough to think magic is totally just for kids. You also get a few spells that can change Jake into a completely different character, including a birdman that can fly around the stage, a lion that has an invincible spin jump, and a fishman that can, well, swim. All of these characters offer some awesome upgrades over just using Jake, with their only downside being that you can't use any other magic spells until you change back to Jake. But using them in the right stages and on the right bosses can make things much easier than what they would have been otherwise. Being able to change into different characters, refill your health when things get rough, and use items that would normally be powerful pickups in other games whenever you want is actually really fun. But keep in mind that using each spell will take a chunk from your magic meter that sits next to your health bar. So you'll need to know when and where to best utilize those spells, since your magic meter only recharges at the end of each stage. As for stages, Totally Rad has 5 acts that are made up of 2 to 3 individual stages each, and you'll have a lot of fun using Jake and his magic to get through them. Most of the stages look like your garden variety NES levels, but learning where in each stage to best utilize Jake's magic attacks goes a long way in making each one fun and distinct. For instance, it's totally plausible to use Jake in this underwater section, but you can also switch over to the Fishman to access the platforms that run across the top of the stage. This goes along with just about every area and gives the game a very open-ended feel to it, as you can always experiment with different spells if a particular section or boss is giving you a headache. The bosses themselves definitely deserve some mention here, as each one is just as ridiculous as they are massive. Their size and spectacle sadly doesn't translate to being very challenging though, as most are easily brought down with some well-timed shots and jumps, or simply saving your magic so you can stop time over and over to beat them to death while they're frozen in place. The game overall can still be fairly challenging, so this definitely won't be one of those games you'll beat on your first playthrough. Thankfully, it's enjoyable enough throughout that you won't mind mastering Jake's abilities even after the multiple attempts. If there's one thing that Totally Rad accomplishes above all else, it's showing just how awesome it was being a kid in the late 80s and early 90s, as it's the only time I could possibly ever imagine a game like this even being made without any nostalgic irony behind it. With its super bright neon aesthetic and non-stop dude-rific lingo plastered everywhere, there can be no mistake what era this game was made in the minute you turn it on. Honestly, it's one of the things I genuinely miss about that time period. It was just a big, colorful explosion of unabashed awfulness, and no one seemed to be aware of it, the least of which Totally Rad seemed to be. The game itself is overall a fairly enjoyable, well-made action platformer that has some fun with what it's trying to accomplish. And it's kind of sad that not too many people got the chance to play it, since this could have definitely been an awesome game to pick up from the video store for the weekend. There's no doubt I definitely would have loved it if I'd picked it up myself back then. For anyone wanting to check out Totally Rad in the present day though, you can usually find the cart by itself on eBay for an affordable price, especially considering how rare it was back in the day, and I definitely think it's worth the asking price. You not only get a decently fun game, but you also get a time capsule of sorts that'll put you right back in the middle of early 90s pop culture, for better and worse. So do yourself a favor and pick up a copy of Totally Rad. It may not be quite as awesome as the title suggests, but I can guarantee you that the entire package is indeed totally bodacious.